Good evening. With this virus, things are totally different and odd and a little out of whack, but we thought we'd do our Good Friday service virtually, and we would do a kind of a walk through the Stations of the Cross. Over the years, I've done a number of wood blocks and cuttings, and sometimes used oil painting and fabric to look at the various ways of becoming more in touch with what Christ did for us. I started with the journey to the cross, followed by the hands and feet of Christ. Then I did the way of sorrow, and then the trees of sorrow, and last year I did the faces of Christ. I've put a few of these together to facilitate our service tonight. And I hope as we walk through and as we look at these prints, you'll become emotionally and physically involved with each station. Slow down and take a moment to really look at Scripture, and for just a moment, come closer to the sacrifice Jesus made for you. Granted, some of the prints are a little dark and confusing, but that must have been a similar experience that night and the following day for the disciples of Christ. Our first station is called prayer. Let me read some scripture. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, with his closest friends to pray. He prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Spend a few moments and look at the print. And consider some of these questions. Especially when you wrestle with that question of Jesus himself. I want your will to be done, not mine, Father. What would you be thinking and praying about knowing tomorrow you will feel great pain and then die? Maybe at this moment you need to pause right now and declare, I want your will to be done, Father, not my own. Pray honestly to God about your own fears this evening. Pray about those things that seem so overwhelming. Disease, loss, depression, isolation. Pray for strength to pursue God's will above your own, regardless of how hard it all feels right now. The next print, get behind me. We read this. Peter was one of Jesus' closest followers, but Jesus told Peter, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Peter did just that. And when he heard the rooster crow, he must have recalled that moment when Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." With such memories, Peter went in sorrow outside, we're told, and wept bitterly. Pause for a moment and listen. What do you hear? Is it quiet? Is there someone else in the room speaking or moving about? Wait. Do you hear the rooster? You see, each day we are called upon to decide whether to stand up for Jesus or disown him. Each day we're called to reflect, is today the day I stand firm or get distracted by the noise and the fears of life? Jesus on one occasion said, "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven." Point, our actions reflect our relationship with Jesus. So ask yourself tonight, this night of all night, when have I been disobedient on the outside regarding my faith to God? What steps do I need to take to make sure this is not a pattern in the future? Ask God to forgive you. Ask God to forgive you for the times when by actions you disowned him. Just remember, Jesus forgave Peter, and he will forgive you. Our next station is a print of the face, a concept that I had of the face of Christ. We're told in the Bible, though innocent, Jesus is condemned to die as if he were a criminal. His rights were stripped from him, and he stood alone. With pressure from the priests, the crowd shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him." And Pilate washed his hands of the responsibility and carried out that judgment. We are living in such a different time. We're trying to keep everything clean. Here's a bottle of Clorox disinfecting wipes. If you have some Perel or a wipe nearby, why don't you take it and wipe your hand, clean your hand. And as you do so, reflect on the ways you need to acknowledge the responsibility for the decisions you have made or are making in your life. Specifically, focus on the sinful choices you have made that contribute to the way to the cross. On this night, ask yourself, am I lying to God about anything? Am I being honest with other people about the truth of who I am? Pilate was not a Jew, but he was the only one who could decide if Jesus should be put to death. He was afraid of the people's reaction, so he made a bad choice by not standing up for the law and for those under his jurisdiction. Point: how do you feel when you make choices that turn you away from the face of Jesus? Ask God to give you better understanding of what responsibility and honesty look like in your relationship with him. Pray that he reminds you of his love and his grace daily. We come to our next station. Jesus' clothes are taken, he is beaten, and he is crowned. We're told in the Bible that they made fun of Jesus and they placed a large crown of thorns on his head, and that the thorns dug deep into his skin. We have never had that experience. But you probably have pricked your hand from a thorn of a rose or a cactus. You've had a shot. And you probably still can remember the pain of that. Just multiply that over and over and over again, and imagine the pain of having all of those thorns pushed down upon your head. The robe, the cloth, they took everything from him. Everything. On this Good Friday, we remembered the intense physical pain. But we also remember the emotional strain of being ridiculed and left naked and alone to die, deserted by all his followers and friends. How do you feel when people make fun of you? Is my first response revenge or forgiveness? What is the most intense emotional pain you have felt? Tonight, give thanks to Jesus for his willingness to endure ridicule for your sake. Ask God to heal the wounds you have placed on others. Ask God for help to assist those who have wounded you and for those you have hurt. Station 5, the cross. Jesus is forced to carry his own cross up to the place where he'll be crucified. The heavy weight of the large wooden cross is on his shoulders. The cross is not made of smooth or sanded wood from Home Depot. It is rough and ragged and full of splinters. In fact, those splinters pierce his skin. Step after step, the rough surface wears into his body. This cross, the cross, rubs against his shoulders as he climbs the hill of execution. As he walks, he knows his destination. He's not confused about the end of the story. He knows he will carry this cross up to the top and he will be nailed to it. And with every step as the wood grinds into his skin, he knows the end is nearing. What experience have you had where the pain of event or the loss has weighed you down? Maybe this isolation or social distancing is weighing on you. Pray through your emotions tonight as you picture Jesus carrying his own cross. Pray through the feelings about him knowing he is walking to his death. Spend time talking to God about your thankfulness for his sacrifice. Pray that God will help bring some clarity to your painful moment. Station 6. In this print, you can see some feet, sandaled feet. As the soldiers led Jesus to be crucified, they seized a man named Simon from Cyrene, and they forced him to carry Jesus' cross. A large crowd followed, including the grief-stricken women displaying love and encouragement to him. Through prayer, we can encourage one another, especially during these dark days of disease and doubt and loneliness. We can bear each other's burden. Tonight would be a good night to write down a prayer and place it somewhere where you can see it. A prayer for someone else, someone you're concerned about. There are people in your life who desperately need to hear or to receive a positive and affirming word or action in their life today. And sometimes we don't feel our words mean anything to someone else, but that just is not true. Our words of encouragement and acts of compassion have deep meaning for people. We just need to pause and show courage by doing it. So who can you encourage tonight? What specific words could you write to someone to give them hope? Sit down and write. Send an email sharing your thoughts with them. What act of compassion can you do in the future? And to whom and how will you do it? Pray that God helps you to become a more encouraging person. Ask for opportunities and the courage to follow through. Ask God to point out people who you may have discouraged so you can become an encourager to them. Ask for his help in showing an act of compassion, not only tonight, but this week. Our next print is called Bitter. As Jesus is on the cross, his humanity is realized like never before. He cries out in his human thirst. One of the guards offers him a drink of vinegar water. He takes in its bitter taste, and it represents the bitterness of our sin that he takes upon himself. As you gaze on this print, you'll notice that it's very confusing. It's almost hard to focus on what's happening. Can you see the nail? Can you see the hammer? Look closely. It was emotionally painful for what was happening on that cross. You know, Jesus had declared earlier in his ministry that he's the thirst-quenching living water for all of life. Yet, at this moment on the cross, he cannot access that living water. So he settles for the bitter water to quench his human thirst in order to save us. The question for us on a Good Friday is, what am I looking to other than Jesus to satisfy my love, my needs? What people or things am I substituting for the living water of Jesus? What would greater dependence upon Jesus for my own identity and desire for love look like if I just depended upon him? Pray that God replaces all the people and things and pursuits you're looking to for love and identity. Pray that he replaces those things with his love. Pray he shows you that you are worthy of his trust and his sacrifice. Well, we finally come to the cross. A very simple print. Not shown in this depiction, but there were two other men crucified next to Jesus, two criminals who deserved to be there. We discover on that cross that Jesus does not care what they have done wrong. He simply wants to love them despite their sin, just like he wants to love us. From the cross, he says, Father, Father, forgive them. They have not a clue what they're doing. We're all broken in some way, people. None of us brings to God a perfect self with everything together. Oh, we may try to act like we have it all together, but even that mask is broken and shown sinful tonight of all nights. We each need to give grace to ourselves as freely and easily as Jesus gave it to the criminals next to him. We also need to freely give it to ourselves. Ask yourself, am I giving myself grace in a way that honors Jesus' sacrifice for me, or am I beating myself up over things that he's already forgiven? Who am I forgiving? And is there a way I could step forward and forgive them tonight? Thank God for his unending grace that is available to everyone. Pray he helps you to feel free from the brokenness that you feel. Considering how generous Jesus has been in giving grace to you, pray for the people you have a hard time giving grace to. Well, we are almost done. We come to this print of an arm and a hand. We're told in the Bible that the sky grew dark, that Jesus drew his last breath. His physical heart stopped beating, and he died. Right now, I ask you to calm yourself. Take a deep breath and slow your thoughts and your breath. In fact, you might want to just take your hand and place it over your heart. Can you feel the beating of your own heart? That's the sound of life. It's the first sound we listen for in a newly formed baby growing inside the womb. The beating heart. That day, it was the last sound of Jesus' dying body. And those responsible for killing him thought his light would be extinguished forever when his heart stopped beating. Tonight, pray that God helps you value and have a greater appreciation for the life and you and others have been granted. Pray he helps you spend your time and energy on pursuits of eternal value. Decide to make some changes tonight. Then our last print. 2 hands open in invitation. Normally on a Good Friday and a Maundy Thursday, we would celebrate communion. We can't do that tonight. But we rejoice. In this darkness of Good Friday, we rejoice knowing the sacrifice he has made. And we rejoice in knowing that there will be morning. There will be light in darkness. Tonight I say, God bless you. God bless you in this darkest of nights. And one day, brothers and sisters in Christ, we will rejoice. We will celebrate Easter together one day in the morning.